India was able to find a formula to bridge that gap, and that is a significant diplomatic achievement, because when there is a summit without a joint communique, it is always seen as a setback for the chairman. Here, the chairman has pulled off a diplomatic triumph. That is the positive thing. But the overall presidency has been different from previous presidencies, and there are both good and bad elements in it. With the G20 summit itself, we saw two very disappointing developments. One was the complete exclusion of the public interest from the summit. You found, for example, the shutdown of Delhi for 3 days, with great difficulties caused to daily wage workers and others who had no income for those days. The attempt to hide poverty rather than to deal with the poor and assist them during this difficult time. This was really disappointing. The second negative in terms of the summit itself was the complete failure to accommodate the opposition. The same spirit of accommodation and conciliation that we saw in achieving the declaration was not extended in the domestic concept, in the domestic context, to Indians. The leader of the opposition was not invited. The opposition members of parliament were not invited, not even the members of the relevant parliamentary committees dealing with foreign affairs. Nobody was invited to any of the events, the receptions, or the dinner. And the result is that a democracy, a country that called itself the mother of democracy, was showcasing an event from which the democratic opposition was excluded. I thought that was very unfortunate. So that's on the summit itself. On the presidency as a whole, one of the things that was remarkable, I would say, about the government's conduct of the presidency was that they did something that no previous G20 presidency has done. They actually made it a huge nationwide event, 200 meetings in 58 cities, a huge amount of action, and the conversion of the G20 into a sort of people's G20 with public events, the Hornbill Festival, the University Connect program, the civil society and think tank meetings. All of these things were unprecedented. No other country has done anything like that. And that is in some ways both a credit to India for taking the message of the G20 to the entire people, but it's also an attempt by the ruling party to instrumentalize the G20 as something that would turn out to be an asset for them politically. Now, they have every right to do that. They're the ruling party. But no other country has done this before. India has hosted many summits. Never has the ruling party celebrated its leadership in such a way. The whole Vishwaguru concept, the posters of Mr. Modi every 50 meters in Delhi over the weekend, all of these are advertising the G20 as if it is a personal achievement of Mr. Modi and the BJP government. And that, I think, has raised some eyebrows, even internationally, judging by some of the foreign coverage I've seen of the G20. So success when it comes to the outcome, less impressive when it comes to the democratic practices that were not followed, and somewhat sort of curious that one of the main purposes of the G20 appears to have been to anoint the ruling party and the Prime Minister for the forthcoming general elections. That would be my overall assessment. Chief ministers have responsibility for their states. It is the national level leader of the opposition and the opposition MPs who follow national policies and foreign policy. So when you're having an international event, MPs are the ones who normally would be the ones to invite if you want to showcase some opposition MPs as part of your mother of democracy concept. But no MPs were invited, not even Mr. Kharge, the leader of the opposition. That is unprecedented, surprising, and disappointing. It was a new development. I think while something like the admission of the African Union was expected, even telegraphed well before the summit, and whereas even some of the other agreed language on debt relief, on sustainable development, and so on, all of that can be advertised as successful, but it doesn't really connect to any concrete outcome so far. It's just, capable, pious platitudes, one might say, which were well done, no problem with it. But at the same time, one could definitely argue that that alone does not give us enough to be celebrating. The India-Middle East EU initiative is completely new, not something that was anticipated earlier, and that has tremendous potential for the future, provided it is implemented properly. The worry about many international summits is very often that in our country, we've also seen this, that you have a summit, you focus on agreeing a declaration and you get a triumphant result in terms of agreed language, but then implementation never follows. We've seen, for example, on issues like the availability of development financing or the promises by rich countries to contribute towards climate change efforts in the developing world, that there is excellent language in many summits going back 15 years, but none of this has actually been implemented. The sums promised has never come and action has not resulted. So I would say on this one, it's a welcome initiative, but the proof of the pudding, as the cliche goes, is in the eating. We will have to see how well this is implemented in our country and in the other countries that are part of this initiative. I'm in touch with both Amitabh Kant, the G20 Sherpa, and with our foreign minister, and I would congratulate them because what they have done is certainly very, very good for India. It is not easy to pull off a diplomatic negotiation like this. They both seem to have put in a lot of hard effort, and I think one should give credit where credit is due. Some of the other things that I've expressed to you, which are less positive, I've also expressed to them. But as far as the achievement of actually squaring the circle, which is an impossible task almost, on Ukraine is concerned, it's really very, very impressive, because for 9 months, we were genuinely facing at every one of, for example, the finance ministers meeting, the foreign ministers meeting, etc. There was no agreement. And the positions seemed to be getting farther apart rather than closer together. So it really was an extremely effective achievement to pull this off. And I will not hesitate to compliment those led by Amitabh Kant and Foreign Minister Jaishankar. I will not hesitate to compliment those who worked hard to pull this off, because it wasn't an easy thing to pull off. I mean, I think Mr. Putin's not coming was less of a surprise. He didn't go to the BRICS summit in South Africa either. He has faced a number of challenges ever since he launched the war in Ukraine, with even some international arrest warrants against him and so on. I think he has increasingly left a lot of this international conferencing responsibility to his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov. He himself not coming was largely expected, though it would have been good if he'd come, because in India, of course, he would have received a warm welcome from the government, no doubt about that. But there are other attendees of the G20 who might have been less than happy to interact with him. So in many ways, that is, let's say, not something worth making a big fuss about. But President Xi not coming was unfortunate for two reasons. He's gone to other summits, including just recently the South African BRICS summit. He's holding other international conferences in Beijing. So not coming to India looks very much like a snub to India. It's also true that apart from not perhaps wanting to meet Mr. Modi and discuss the thorny and perhaps intractable issues between India and China on the border, he also probably didn't want to encounter President Biden, who has taken an increasingly tough line on China on a number of aspects relating to China's international belligerence, some of the trade conflictual issues between the US and China, and of course the question of Taiwan. So for all of these reasons, he has chosen to stay away. And I think it's a pity in many ways that China missed an opportunity to participate in such a consensus, such a consensual outcome, and also to participate in an event that might have helped promote a thaw in China's relations with India. Right now, our relations are worse than they've been for a very long time. And by not coming, President Xi is conveying the message that he doesn't care about improving the relationship.